The 1960s saw the civil rights movement gain momentum, but despite legal victories, segregation remained widespread across the South. Activists, inspired by Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophy of nonviolent resistance, used direct action protests to challenge racial injustice. Two of the most powerful examples of this were the Greensboro sit-ins of 1960 and the Freedom Rides of 1961. These acts of peaceful resistance exposed the brutal reality of segregation and forced the federal government to take action. On February 1st, 1960, 4 Black students in Greensboro, North Carolina, sat at a segregated lunch counter in Woolworth's department store. When they were refused service, they remained seated in protest. The next day, more students joined, and within weeks, sit-ins spread to cities across the South. These young activists faced daily harassment, shouting, threats, and even physical attacks, but they did not retaliate. Their courage was broadcast across the nation, generating widespread public sympathy. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, was formed in response, bringing together young activists committed to peaceful protest. Eventually, the economic pressure of boycotts and continued demonstrations forced businesses like Woolworth's to desegregate their lunch counters. The sit-ins had proven that nonviolent protest could bring real change. Another major test of nonviolent resistance came with the Freedom Rides of 1961. Even though the Supreme Court had ruled that segregated bus terminals were illegal, many Southern states ignored the decision. To challenge this, an interracial group of activists known as the Freedom Riders boarded buses traveling through the South, determined to test whether desegregation laws were being followed. The Freedom Riders faced extreme violence. In Anniston, Alabama, one of their buses was firebombed, forcing passengers to flee for their lives. In Birmingham, riders were met by an angry white mob, brutally beaten while police officers stood by. These horrifying images were broadcast across the country, shocking the American public. The violence became too great for the federal government to ignore. Under mounting pressure, President John F. Kennedy sent federal marshals to protect the Freedom Riders and enforce desegregation laws. The impact of these protests was enormous. They revealed to the world the brutality of white resistance to civil rights. They demonstrated the increasing involvement of young activists determined to fight for justice. They forced the federal government to intervene, proving that nonviolent protest was a powerful tool for change. Most importantly, the sit-ins and Freedom Rides set the stage for further civil rights victories, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964. These courageous acts of resistance showed that peaceful protest could challenge injustice, inspire national support, and push America toward racial equality.